I spoke in 2021 at an event with 20 billionaires.
What would you say is the important distinction?
He's like, you're not really a business owner, you're a business runner.
You've been to parties with, lots of millionaires.
Billionaires are big on OPM. Millionaires are often bootstrappers.
Every millionaire is very quick to tell me that they're a millionaire.
One of the wealthiest guys in the room, and he was flying coach.
What does that actually mean, and why is that actually important?
Because it's not just about me, it's about how many people can I help. Right? And the thought of I'll just make more leads to inefficiency and sloppiness.
What would you say is the key mindset from the billionaires?
Here's one of the biggest difference between a billionaire and a millionaire.
I remember I was talking with one of my friends, and he was talking about his billionaire buddy, and that he's a millionaire, he had gone to lunch with his billionaire buddy. And he had this really great idea. And he was like, hey, dude, I got this idea for this business, shared it with them. And his billionaire buddy was like, that's a great idea. Yeah, let's go forward with that. A month later, they do lunch again. And the millionaire guy is like, hey, what's happening with that idea? Any progress? And he says, yeah, I'm trying to find the right person to take it forward.
So where did you hear this story?
Was it you?
It was me.
Okay, cool.
That's what's funny. I was like, I know this story. So
Okay.
One of my early mentors, I remember one day, our like internet was having problems, which was creating problems because we had voice over IP, like we had internet for all of our phone calls, and we had, so all of our sales calls and coaching calls, it was just melting down. And I remember calling him and complaining. He goes, do you think if this happened at one of Warren Buffett's companies, he'd know about it and be complaining like you are? I'm like, probably not. He goes, do you think if he showed up to a company he owned that they would come and bring this problem to him? I'm like, probably not. He goes, right, they'd just be excited to see him. He's like, you're not really a business owner, you're a business runner. You're like part of the problem, that everything's coming through you. You're working so hard and you really haven't built up enough of a team, or you haven't allowed your team to grow up because you're doing too much of it. You're the bottleneck.
Yeah.
And it was like the first time I really understand working on your business versus in your business, like really clearly. And so later on when we were coaching, he's telling me this story, and he would go have lunch once a month with Phil Romano.
Oh, okay.
Like Romano's Macaroni Grill, Fuddruckers, all that. He's like, hey, do you know someone that could run this thing that I have an idea for? And he's like, yeah. He's like, that sounds like an awesome idea. Let me look. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
And so, he couldn't find anyone. They have lunch the next month. And he's like, so what's going on with that? He's like, well, I'm looking for the CEO. I'm looking for the person that can take care of this and grow this. And again, like you said, it was a couple months. And finally, Phil says to Rick, he goes, hey, man, the difference between you and me is you'd be hustling and you'd be stuck working 18-hour days already with this idea because you think it's so great, rather than finding the person that had the expertise. He goes, that's why I'm a billionaire.
Yeah.
And you're not. And, he told that story. And Rick would go out there and find like charity auctions or events where there'd be billionaires, and he would just buy his way to have a meeting with them.
Wow.
Through donation, through whatever it took. Like, when he met Richard Branson, he just made a donation to one of the charities that Richard was part of. And so he was able to get time with him, or same with T. Boone Pickens. And I think he ended up meeting like 17 billionaires through that process to learn from them. So that was a pretty interesting story.
Yeah. So personally a few billionaires. I think.
Yep.
What are some insights that you've gotten from those individuals? Just through observation or actually communicating with them.
If you want to really achieve something, especially something substantial or world class, there's really 4 things that will make the biggest difference.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing is co-create. These people were all about co-creation. They had the right people on their team that they could offload things and that they could work through to kind of materialize what their thoughts were and to figure it out. They weren't doing it just on their own. The second thing is they're so good at eliminating things. They just don't have some of the distractions that normal people would have every day, meaning they're not binge watching Netflix. They're not, they're not as much like doing some of the things that people say they don't have time, but then they are wasting a lot of time. They were just so much more strategic that way. And then the third thing is they were masterful delegators, right? They could just delegate, but they would delegate roles. They would say, all right, here's someone in my organization. They own this role. They take care of this specific thing. And what that does is free them up to continue to be visionary, to continue to build massive relationships. And then the fourth thing is they're just really good at collaboration, because co-creation is one other person that supports you. Collaboration is a group of people or organizations that can help you bring something to fruition that you might have the idea that might be revolutionary, but you wouldn't have the technology or the ability yourself. And I just watched that over and over throughout that day. And they were up to game-changing big idea things. It wasn't about survival. It wasn't just about paying the bills. They got to a place where, they were thinking, how do I make substantial difference? And, it was a very interesting, fascinating, felt very comfortable around them type of experience.
Yeah. So let's contrast that with, you've also been at meetings.
There are also some eccentric people in the room, Weston. Not gonna lie.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Of the billionaire crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like one guy, I gave everybody these wine tools as a gift because it had coal on the handle. I have one right over there. Has coal on the handle, and then it's a wine opener. And I said, hey, this is to remind you of all the hard work it took for you to get here, because my dad was a coal miner.
Yeah.
And to celebrate the wins along the way. And this one guy I gave it to, he goes, well, I can't take that on the airplane. I'm like, oh. He was flying commercial, not a private jet, one of the wealthiest guys in the room, and he was flying coach. And I said, well, I could just mail it to you. He goes, I don't give people my address. I live in a bunker. I was like, what? You can send it to my nephew and he'll get it to me. So, there was some of that too. And
let's contrast that. You've been to parties with, lots of millionaires, right? What would you say is kind of the key kind of stark difference you've seen between kind of the mindset of the crowds?
Yeah. A lot of millionaires are more public about everything in their life and less, private, because maybe social media and stuff like that. There's a lot of variance of ideas where you could have someone that's got so many things going on, it's hard to keep up with what they're actually doing. And some of them are just early in their career. They're millionaires because they haven't, they've done well, but they haven't quite figured out how to build their team. I spoke in 2021 at an event with 20 billionaires. What I found was each one of them got really, really rich in one area. And they were super focused, and they didn't start to diversify until they had substantial wealth.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think of multiple streams of income, but that could become multiple streams of distraction. And a lot of people create a lot of complexity, and that becomes overwhelming. I just was amazed at how simple they could keep things. Some of these people sold their companies to Pfizer, or some of these people had, exited companies for $50 billion. The first thing is, if we really want to grow, it's really important to invest in ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. And, that's the skills that really matter. I think that all the billionaires have a financial intelligence, right? Some of the millionaires don't have as much financial intelligence because they erroneously think, I'll just make more money. Right. And the thought of I'll just make more leads to inefficiency and sloppiness.
Okay. So would you say in your observation that most of the billionaires had very great efficiency?
Well, they say no to a whole lot more things.
Gotcha.
And they will turn down good ideas that can make them money to be focused on the things that really are part of their vision. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you see a lot of these, people that are millionaires, that they're able to do what they do. But I think a lot of times they kind of sometimes get stuck in investing in themselves, and they think more about growing their own skills instead of increasing the team skills.
Gotcha.
Having the right team around them.
So a starting point is investing in yourself, but then there becomes a time where you need to invest in your team.
Right. Because it's really important to always ask, if you're in charge, what are you doing and why you're doing it?
Okay.
And if you're seduced by too many shiny objects and go, ooh, that's great, what starts to happen is the how and when can get destroyed. Because if there's so much happening and the team can't handle that, there's too many false starts. There's one thing that goes wrong. Other things don't have as much attention towards it. And so that can become problematic for sure. I also feel like a lot of the millionaires like to tell me how well they're doing.
Yeah.
None of these billionaires told me how well they were doing.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is I would say every millionaire that I know is very quick to tell me that they're a millionaire, right?
Have I told you that before? Because I'm not a billionaire, Weston.
Yeah.
I am not a billionaire.
but yeah, I think there's a lot of that kind of like, hey, I'm a millionaire, even when they're not, right? There's people who are like, you're talking 800,000 or something like that, which is close, but they're very welcome to be like, oh, I'm earning, seven figures.
The first time I had, $1 million in assets net, I was 26 years old.
Did you start telling everyone?
I remember I was on a flight and I was doing the numbers and I was like, okay, what changed? Like now that I know it, am I going to tell people this?
Yeah.
And at that time, I kind of did want people to know that I was a millionaire because it was like this goal. Oh, I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. And then, by the time I was, I think, 28, I was at 8 million. And when I was 29, I got down to 0. Had a lot of real estate in 2008 and it didn't really work out. It was a year of lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing you had mentioned was they delegate roles.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean and why is that actually important?
Okay. So a role would be like having an objective. And inside that objective, there could be a lot of operational things, right? Operational things are where often people micromanage, right?
Tasks.
Yeah, these are the tasks and things like that. An objective could be, hey, I'm going to have 100 licensees in the next year, right? Now, there's a lot of things. I might be doing webinars, speeches, I might be doing, there's a number of things I might do to bring that about, but if someone owned that objective, that's the objective. That's the role. If someone doesn't own the role, if it's just like, I declare this and now I'm in charge of it and it's just delegating tasks, I'm now going, all right, here, you handle this today, you handle this tomorrow. Oh, that's done. Now do this next, versus putting someone where they're empowered to say, this, I'm going to own this like it's my business.
Yeah.
You can count on me. And if I don't know how to get there, I'll come to you and ask for support. I'll figure out how to be more resourceful.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like, you're welcome to do anything and everything that helps us get to that objective.
Right. And so, if that's an objective, then I might go through and list, who do I know that has communities of financial people to license my content? Right. I might create a discovery process. So if someone's interested, that we could find out if it's a fit for them and help them engage. I might have like a report of findings meeting that shows, what I found in that discovery and what could be done and give them an idea of what's happening there. I might, I might hire people that help me to build all the technology that would support this process. And, so there's a bunch of different operations that help out that objective, but most people are so caught up in the operational pieces that it goes into they're the bottleneck. Like me early on when Rick was telling me, hey, you're not really a business owner, you're a business runner, and everything's going through you, because I didn't know how to build a team. I didn't know how to empower the team. I didn't know how to delegate properly. It was always my first assistant, Amy. I'd say, all right, okay, I just finished with this meeting. Here's the things that need to be done. I go to the next meeting. Here's the things that need to be done. And then eventually I said in 2006, I was like, what I want you to do is be in charge of customer service. And let's talk about what those objectives are. It'd be every quarter you're talking to someone and you're doing an evaluation where we find out our net promoter score and we find out, is there anything that we can improve on? So we might have all these operations that we choose, but we're like, hey, how do we know that this is actually handled? Is we'd say, we want to have a net promoter score of 9.5 or higher. So it would be her responsibility to survey that and then bring that back to the team and say, what could we do to add more value? Is it through strategic partnerships? Is it through better communication with the client? Is it through hosting events? Like, we're just going to go through and figure out, how do we get that where they are wanting to refer us, so they're so happy with what we do. So that's a very clear objective. That's a role. Like, hey, you're in customer service. This is what you're going to have done in the next year. Like, how are all the different ways that we get there? Well, we can brainstorm that, but you're the person in charge.
Yeah.
You're the person that's saying, how do we get there? And then you're bringing us in to support you.
In my own business, I've found that sometimes I was quick to delegate the wrong things and slow to delegate the right things. Any observations you've had about like what are components that shouldn't be delegated versus what should?
First off, when I was starting in 1998 in financial services, I did the paperwork and I thought, man, I can't hand this off to someone else. And when I finally did, I realized they were better at it than me, and it freed up a whole bunch of time for me to the point where they don't want me touching paperwork as time goes on because it was more of their skill set. So on the other hand, you know, I tried to build like a speaking agency where other people could go speak on my behalf, so I wasn't only the one on the road. And that didn't work out quite as well because it's one of the things I was specifically talented in.
Yeah.
And so I had to reframe and say, well, if the constraint is I can only be on the road so often and still be a good family man and have good health and enjoy my life, then the constraint being, let's solve it through webinars. Back then it was teleseminars. And right, like, so you look at what those constraints are, and sometimes when there's a constraint, people just want to relegate it. Relegation is you hand it to someone and they don't know the conditions of satisfaction.
Oh, okay.
Right? The conditions of satisfaction is what would this have to look like in the end where we're like, that's an A, you know?
Gotcha.
That's a 10 out of 10.
So that's like, you know, handing something off to someone that they don't really care about.
Right.
They do it at a 50% level because they're going to get it done, but it's not at the same level.
Because all the time a business owner might say, I don't have the time to teach you.
Yeah.
But the thing is, this is hard, easy, not easy, hard. What does that mean? Hard, easy means it takes extra time to hire.
Yeah.
It takes even more time potentially to hire extraordinarily well.
Mm-hmm.
It takes time to train someone.
Yeah, it takes time
all
to
those
delegate.
things could be hard, but as you do that, life gets a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
In the moment, it's so much easier to do yourself, but as time goes on, it gets harder because you hit like bandwidth issues. You hit that ceiling, right? There's only so much time, and there's a thing where you just start losing energy, right? Because you're doing too much yourself. And then when you're doing too much yourself, now all of a sudden the energy you have, because it's lower, you're not getting quite as much done. It might even get sloppier. You might not be able to perform at your very best, because even in, you know, if we look at like sports, teams don't play every night. They take nights off, and some of the free time, you know, Dan Sullivan's really genius at this, talking about the entrepreneurial time system, free days, focus days, and buffer days. Free days are for relaxation, rejuvenation, and recreation, so that when you come back and you have a buffer day, those are the practice days. Those are the preparation days. So the focus days are you're at your very best when you're doing the things that are the highest profit driving things. So if we just relegate something, it is, we don't have the time, so we give it to someone. They don't know the conditions of satisfaction.
Like little to no training.
Yeah, little.
You just say, hey, take it over. I can't.
Yep, little to no training. And then when it doesn't go the way we want, we're now frustrated. We have to clean up the mess.
Yeah, and we say, this is why I'm just going to do it myself.
You want something done right, you have to do it yourself,
Yep.
all this kind of stuff. It's like it takes work to get to the place where you're not just investing in you, where you're like, I've got to increase my skills. You never stop that. But there's another phase that when you invest in your team, you say, what would it take to grow them? How could I invest time in them? And I look at it like, for every minute I spend with them, it's probably going to save me 120 minutes. So it's very effective if I have the right teammate.
But it's still, I think the important part there is it's still time. You still have to spend some time. So it's like maybe it's an hour, but then that hour spent saves you 10.
No one's going to become a billionaire by doing everything themselves, other than Sam Altman just said, we'll find the first billionaire with no employees because of AI.
But they're still not doing it themselves. They're
using AI and tools and systems and technology and all that kind of stuff. But this is a major difference. But here's one of the biggest difference between a billionaire and a millionaire. A millionaire, you'll hear say, self-made. It means too much on their own.
Yeah.
Means they think about, and this is a big difference, and maybe a big part of why I'm not a billionaire, is all those billionaires had the money to do the projects they were doing, and they were still raising funds from other people. Billionaires are big on OPM. Millionaires are often bootstrappers.
What's OPM?
Other people's money.
Oh, gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
So a millionaire might say, hey, This thing is 100% mine. A billionaire might say, well, I'm going to own 51%, but you know what? It's going to be a much bigger pie.
So they're okay. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Because it'll benefit others.
Because they want to tap into other people's money, other people's time, and other people's ability.
And they're okay with rewarding those people along the way.
Right. Because, if you read about Warren Buffett and what his days are like, there's times where he'll just be in his office reading for like 8.5 hours and take a few phone calls. And he's just reading and researching because his expertise is allocating capital. When he buys a company, he has a methodology and philosophy and a team to implement that. He's not getting mired in all those details, and most millionaires get mired in the details.
Yeah.
Right? So it's more like, hey, here's our methodology, here's our process, here's our framework. And without a framework, if there's not a framework or a philosophy, what happens then is more work.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hustle, grind, all that kind of stuff. And here's the thing. Nobody became a billionaire by being lazy.
Yeah.
But they became that by being super effective. It wasn't linear. It wasn't like, okay, here we go. This is time and this is effort. And their growth comes from over time, just more and more effort and waiting longer and longer. And then you finally get there. Yeah, anyone can have millions doing that. But that's not the billionaire model. It's not linear with time and effort. It's got to be more exponential. So how do we get it to be exponential?
Other people's money, other people's time.
Other people's ability, or whatever that looks like. Right? So these three constraints, money, time, and ability, are the lies that reduce wealth. I don't have the money. I don't have the time. I don't have the ability.
Yeah.
That's okay. Well, look, it doesn't take money to make money. Sure, you can make money on money, but it really takes relationships and ideas, value, and exchange. So the first thing is we've got to be able to receive. You've got to allow for other people to serve you. If you try to do too much yourself, you'll hit that ceiling. You won't have enough bandwidth. And here's the thing. No one, I'll repeat that, no one shrinks their way to wealth. So we could go, Weston, and we could just scroll Instagram, and you're going to find all these people that say, hey, do you want to become a millionaire?
Budget.
Or a multimillionaire? And it's all about taking money, putting it into some asset, and waiting for a long enough period of time. Right now we're seeing all this volatility in the market. Like, don't try to time the market, just stay in it for the long haul. And it's like, okay, I get it, but like, this is not the model for the billionaire. It's not money equals, or it's not wealth equals money times rate times time. That is too linear.
Yeah.
It really has to do with, if you've got a massive vision that can impact a lot of people, right? Either a whole lot of people or deeply impact those people. That's what it takes. So as an example, life insurance agents can be like, I'm going to sell so much insurance. I'm just going to go out there. I'm going to meet with as many clients. I'm going to do as many policies as I can. And they could make a good living doing that. But then when someone comes out and says, we've created a technology to get you instant quotes, limited underwriting to get that policy.
And it could do a better job.
And it gets out there to millions, right? That's a lot more leverage. So usually, if someone's an individual trying to be a millionaire in someone's system, it'll have limited upside. But if you actually create the system to allow for a lot of people to become millionaires, you could become a billionaire.
Yeah.
Because you're helping support them to produce a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of thinking, what can I do to grow? You think, what can I do to grow a ton of people? Add a ton of value. And that could be, that could be like a customer deal, or it could be B2B. You can just say, how do I absolutely improve an industry? So let me use an example in my own life.
Yep.
What would the Rockefellers do?
Mm-hmm.
This is a book that has sold hundreds of thousands of copies. It's got 2,500 plus organic reviews on it. And what we found was people were buying dozens and sometimes hundreds of copies because they're people that are, maybe legal people selling trusts or insurance people.
Mm.
And the book does a really good job. So like when I wrote the book, I'll say this, I wasn't selling insurance. My co-author was. And so what I could do is I could write, right? I could basically write money into my life because they would just schedule appointments with him. And I got a percentage back in the day for setting those. Well, now what I'm saying is, look, I've got this book. I'd rather just fill up Michael's calendar, which we do. I'm like, what if we could give that to just a bunch of agents that are certified in the process? All of a sudden, we can make a lot more money because of leverage and scale. Because it's not just about me, it's about how many people can I help. And by the way, each one of these people represent helping thousands of people.
Yeah.
So it's a totally different mindset and framework.
Yeah.
Not saying that's like the ultimate billionaire framework. I'm just saying that it's definitely more capacity. Why is it more capacity? Because I'm arming someone that's looking for that tool. Like a lot of people that are good at financial planning aren't good at marketing. They're not good at getting referrals. They're just great technicians. Well, if I'm good at utilizing tools like books and videos and courses and, different things like that, and I could say, hey, it's tested, it works, let me hand it to you. We're just getting people left and right that are using that. And all of a sudden they've become more effective. They're making more money and I'm helping them because by collaborating, we went from, 2 finite pies to a much bigger pie.
Yeah. So going back to investing in your team, what does that actually mean? What are some examples of how do you actually invest in your team?
Retreats.
Okay. Because I think sometimes we just stop at like, investing in the team is like getting new employees, but that doesn't seem to be what you're saying.
Yep. Daily calls, getting to know them, discovering their currency. So what I mean by this, like obviously money is a currency.
Yeah.
But also flexibility could be someone's currency. I want to, I have kids and I want to be flexible to be able to go to their games. That could be an example. Or acknowledgement. They might just, say, I want to be acknowledged for the work that I do. Or they might just want to feel like they're part of a team and they want to feel like they're up to a bigger vision, or that, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts because of everyone working together. It might be that, they just like having, like a bonus that everybody gets to participate in because they feel like, hey, I get to work together. And it reminds me of back when I played sports,
Oh, gotcha.
So you find out like what makes them tick. But it's also, you could send them to masterminds.
Gotcha. Paying for their own education.
Like in my old firm, we had, the CEO went to a certain mastermind for CEOs. Our CMO and I went to a lot of the marketing things. We went to different masterminds, it could be courses. I took a bunch of my team to the Wizard Academy, which is a business and marketing academy. And so we were able to go, we were able to hang out and do things like that. Like right now I do weekly Zoom training on Mondays at 3:15. You've been on those. And it's like, that's one of the ways I could invest in the team.
Yeah.
I could give an allotment of money towards education. What education is good for them outside the classroom. If someone wanted to be a speaker, there's amazing speaking education. If they want to be a writer, there's amazing education on that. Like whatever their skill set is that they're working on, how do I help them increase it? Now, some people are scared of these things. They're like, what if someone recruits them? or, finds out how great they are. Well, that kind of scarcity is going to push them away anyway.
Yeah.
Like you could take actual money and put it into your team, or you could take time that you personally work with the team, right? Or you could just actually combine the two and have amazing retreats. I just had Bobby and Trisha on the team up here because I'm like, we do these immersions, these cash cabin immersions. People come and I consult with them for a whole day. I'm like, why don't I do that with my team? So we came up here and we did a full day.
Oh, cool.
That was an example of like investing in the team.
Yeah.
So whether it's those Monday calls, whether it's coming in to do this, whether it's, like, hey, here's an amazing book that I think you would love, or give them access to the content that we have. And, there's so many ways to do it.
Okay. That's awesome. That's a great insight.
Yeah. And by the way, part of what's helpful here is know that there's at least 5 types of compensation.
Oh.
I mean, one is a salary, but another one was non-monetary bonuses. That could be a trip. That could be a computer, right? Just what is it that they would love but maybe wouldn't pay for themselves?
What's the benefit of a non-monetary?
So you get them something that they truly desire, but for whatever reason won't buy it for themselves.
Oh, okay.
So I had an assistant where I was like, hey, look, if we hit our 5 objectives for this quarter, I'm going to send you and your family to Disney. She had a lot of kids. And she's like, we haven't been. And she worked relentlessly to the point where I gave her even more money to upgrade the trip.
Gotcha.
Right. So it was like, it's just like, I do some of this for myself. It's like, hey, we hit certain objectives. I'm going to Italy. Maybe I could afford to do that without this, but by doing this, it rewards good behavior. When I was like, hey, if I get to this fitness in the gym, then I'm going to buy a new wardrobe. And then those days I didn't feel like working out or doing those extra couple of reps and getting to failure, like I did it because, that's part of it.
Yeah.
There's also just group bonus. That's it. Everybody gets a bonus when something is hit.
The whole team. Yeah.
The whole team. Then there's just bonuses, right, for the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's stock options.
Gotcha. So ownership in.
Yep. And this could be voting or not voting. It could be, you could determine what that is. You could have the first right of refusal on that. So if they, leave, you could buy it back. You could have it be discounted that they get it, or they just get it outright. You could have it vest over time. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do to protect yourself on that. But a lot of people don't really want to be an owner of a company. They think they do.
Yeah.
But they don't want to pay a capital call if something goes wrong. They don't want to be involved if there's a lawsuit that they're now on the line for that.
Yeah.
But they do want upside potential. They do want to feel like if they contribute to the bottom line, they get rewarded. It's not just time and effort equal money. It's like, as I contribute, I get paid more. So right now in this whole, media company that we're building, Weston, I met with Matt, our creative director, and I went through and I was like, here's 7 places where bonuses could exist. Let's just determine what the percentages are. And then he gets that and then he distributes it to the team.
Yeah.
Right. But it's that way everybody feels like as we're growing, everybody's being rewarded.
Yeah.
It's not fixed.
It's a great way to motivate individuals. And also it does help out the business, right? So if you buy a computer for an employee directly from the business, let's say it's $1,000, that's just $1,000 versus if you want to pay that employee enough to where they could buy the computer with
taxable income when you
payroll taxes and all that stuff. Now you have to pay, $1,200, $1,300 for the same computer, right?
Right.
And so it's kind of a win-win in both scenarios.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of this story. There's a company I spoke for several times called Amazing.com.
Mm-hmm.
They taught people how to start a business on Amazon. They were amazing, so good at doing it. Spoke to it's funny because when I went and spoke for them the first time, there was a ton of people there, like 4,000. And I was like, that was amazing. They asked me back. And the next time, there's thousands of people. We're at the Venetian. And I decided, I'm going to fly my wife and kids down because it was in Vegas. And we went to a magic show and hung out. But I remember I spoke and then my kids were pretty young and they came out of the room with my wife and everyone stopping me in the hall, right? And getting pictures and talking. And my sons were like, are you famous, Dad? Like, just today, just because I just spoke, guys. But one of the things they did was they hired us to come and speak to their entire firm.
Uh-huh.
And so I did like a 1-day workshop, right? So we did the 1-day workshop. But then two of my guys, they stayed after for the rest of the week, and they met with everyone in the firm individually on their finances. And they helped them restructure loans, right, to save money. They helped them to save on tax. Some people are getting refunds. They helped them to, make sure that they had transferred risk with their insurance. I mean, they went through their entire financial picture. And one of their executive level people was able to buy their dream kind of home because of that. I think it was actually a cabin. And it was just because we restructured their loans, we saved them on interest, we got some money back on tax. And so this was something they thought they're going to have to wait 10 years, but they had twins. And they're like, cool, they're still young enough that we could go up here and have these experiences. And so instead of just saying, we'll match a 401k, which is, they don't even necessarily feel grateful for, it's just kind of like a standard thing. It was like, that was the way they invested in their team. Right? Because they really got them a comprehensive, personalized financial plan for their employees.
Gotcha. So Amazing.com basically paid for you guys to go do the financial audit more or less with each of their employees.
Yeah, with their employees. Because, we, with one of their executives, one of the two partners, we saved them a ton of money. We did a bunch of stuff for them. He's like, this is amazing. I'd love to do this for the team. And so we did. So there's so many ways to build your team and invest in your team. And when I was just speaking in DC, the former CEO of Pepsi Cola was before me. She'd be interviewed by my friend Michael Scoville, and she had this amazing insight where she's like, hey, I decided that I have like 16, she had like 16 main people that reported to her all over the world, right? These are like the main people.
Yeah.
And she decided, you know what? I'm going to make sure I get to know their parents. I'm going to get to know their family. And she wrote every single one of their parents a letter.
Wow.
And one of them, when their mom died and they cleared out the home, it was like she was living in a nursing home. She only had one thing on the wall. It was that letter.
Wow.
And so it's like, that's investing in your team.
Yeah.
Like I'm not doing a good enough job right now getting to know my team's family. Like what are they, and what are their hobbies, their interests like, right? I want to take some more time to understand that about them. And like, that's one of the ways you can invest in them, when they feel seen, when they feel heard, when they feel cared for, but also increasing their skills in the things they do. Like you went to the 2-day event, that chamber event, to see what we could do better on YouTube.
Yeah, it was
right?
massive. Yeah.
Right. That's an example as well.
Yeah. Going back to you talking about getting to know team members, family members, right? It's a trickle down thing. What happens in our homes affects our work. Right. And so it's like, if you know what's going on and maybe there's advice you can give, or you can see where there's a stressor, and it's like, hey, I'll pay for therapy, or, introduce you to this person. And it's like, now you've helped improve the life of one of your employees, which then improves their employment.
Right. I think of like, I have so many people that have been clients in the past that are just world-class experts on health.
Yeah.
I could have them come and do, a talk on one of the Mondays just to give everybody these great insights. Like a lot of people on our team has worked with Deborah. She's going to be here next week. And so they've Steven's gotten healthier, Bobby's gotten healthier. Like she's been instrumental for people. So when she's here, I'm going to make that available to the team because again, if we have good energy, we're in a much better place.
Yeah.
And, even I would say like just helping them design the life that they love. Like our last Monday call that we had with the team, it was really about like, hey, let's make sure everybody gets their financial house in order. How can we be supportive? We're a firm that does this. So let's help you out as well, because let's be a living example of who we are.
Yeah. One thing that you say a lot is it doesn't always have to be entrepreneurship. It can be intrapreneurship.
Yeah.
Could you go into that?
Yeah. So that's someone that works inside of an organization. What we're looking for is upside potential.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that our firm is a really good example of this. Like there's always people talking about what we could do better. And it's not even my idea. It's like they come up with the idea. I'm like, hey, we could do this. And then they collaborate. Stephen Dean's like, hey, we should send out an email about this deep dive discovery and financial health assessment. And I'll write the emails and, just booked up Bobby's calendar. And it's so much more value for our clients. And it was like just this idea he came up with. Right. And, you're always giving me ideas that we could do here. So like entrepreneurs is how do we reward them for that extra mile, for that extra effort, for that extra benefit that they bring.
Yeah. Like why did that become a thing that you realized, and why is it something that you talk about?
Well, a lot of my books, a lot of the things I talk about is like entrepreneur. And so people are like, what about everybody else? Because first off, entrepreneurs without entrepreneurs are just dreamers.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of doing. So I want to recognize like, well, it's not just for the entrepreneur, it's for the people that are also working within the organization. But to get the mindset that is some of the great pieces of entrepreneurship is that level of responsibility and creativity and building something new. Let's not just leave that on one person's shoulders. Let's see what everybody can contribute. And so the entrepreneurs, when they can think more that way of like, how do I impact it? I'm not just punching a clock. I'm not just putting in my hours, but I'm going, how do I stay engaged in my work? There's so many articles that have talked over the years about people being disengaged with their work.
Yeah.
Just going and doing things because they have to, not because they want to. Well, that's the opposite of entrepreneurial. That's more like, that's like zombie. So it's like, how do you engage in that? How do you contribute? And how do you get rewarded for that contribution?
Yeah. And the reward for the contribution is the key part, right? Because people are less likely to put that extra effort into if there's no benefit for them.
Right. I want them to be solutions oriented.
Yeah.
Not just pointing out a problem. It's really easy to point out problems. Like if we start talking politics, it's so easy, right? Like we just, regardless of the party affiliation, the other one can say what the problem with the other party is.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to point out the problem. It's a little harder to come up with solutions. So entrepreneurs are going to be more solutions focused. They're going to make sure that they're responsible for their actions and their objectives, right? If someone's objective based and they own that role, they treat that role like it's their own business, like it's their own thing, and they get the support. And then when people operate that way, everybody grows.
What are the things that from the billionaires are kind of the main components of this is the mentality that you can use to go forward in your life?
Vision. They just have a much, much bigger vision, right? 2, impact. To get to that level, you can't just hustle. You have to make massive impact, which means where's their leverage? Like venture capital, when they're funding things, they don't fund a lot of manufacturing because it's location dependent. There's constraint with what they can do. But software, they'll fund a lot of that because it just has a lot more reach, right? And, so if you could start thinking of like what's inefficient, what's ineffective, what's antiquated, what are the big problems that could be solved?
Oh, gotcha. So looking for what is inefficient so that you can provide a solution.
Like people that are broke, instead of looking at this, they'll just complain.
Yeah. But they don't do anything about it.
These guys create. They solve it.
Yeah.
Right? So on the impact side, we've got leverage, we've got reach, we've got scale. Then we also look at like, they just don't let time, money, or ability constrain them. There's people that are critical of Elon, or they were critical of Steve Jobs, saying, well, what are they actually doing? They're actually creating and casting the vision.
Yeah.
And then people in that vision are able to deliver more value because it challenges them to create something that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So they don't let these 3 things stop them, right? And 4, they find something that people thought were impossible. Like they just go, this is the way it is. And they make it possible. That seems really trite, but let me explain that. They might say, like my friend Marty Callner, who just died, who was executive producer of my comedy special. They told him, you'll never get through the NFL. But he created Hard Knocks. And that thing's still running for years and years and years and years later because everybody said that wasn't possible, right? They said it was impossible, but he broke through something that was such a constraint or such an obstacle, or people didn't know how to get past it. He was working on this idea called America's Wedding, which was, what if we could someone could fly to Vegas and have a turnkey wedding, but then have someone like Beyonce perform because everybody's coming into the stadium for their first dance. And it's like, think about the scale of that, right?
Yeah.
But making it affordable because there's enough people. So Peter Diamandis once said, he says, if you want to be a billionaire, you have to create $1 of value for 1 billion people. Right? So that's reach. That's not just thinking like 5 people or 10 people. It's thinking, how can you help the population?
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's problem solving. Like, I think it's such a simple way to look at it. I mean, you look at like, Airbnb, what did it solve? Uber,
Right.
what did it solve? Like, there were all these little tiny problems that annoyed people or, that people wanted access to, and they provided a solution.
You have to persist, because there might be this idea, right? And it might take, we might be talking 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden it can have exponential growth, because it might require a lot of infrastructure. Now, in today's world, that might used to be 10 years. Now it might only take 2.5 years. But we've gotten so used to instant gratification that we think that this should happen so fast, because we're so used to, if we put $1 into a savings account, we see that dollar.
Yeah.
But that dollar has very limited upside, right? So we have to be willing to take $1, put it into ourselves to grow the skill, put it into a team to build it out, to eventually have it work out. So I call this the cycle of creation.
Yeah.
Okay, this is really helpful. This will kind of show the whole model. So we start with an idea. People that don't have the success that they want usually keep that idea to themselves.
Okay.
Or they might tell a few people, but they don't do anything with it. Like, we have to turn ideas into concepts. Concepts happen like when a billionaire gets up and they say, here's what we're thinking and here's the problem we're trying to solve. How do we solve world hunger? That's a pretty big problem, right? So once it starts to be shared, it becomes a concept. But then, like we talked about before, you got to have a framework. Framework's where you can delegate. Framework's where other people can help you, right? So without the framework, it stays in a busyness of the individual. Then from the framework, we have the product, or we have the experience, or the service, or whatever it is, right? And then the first turn is your minimum viable product. Don't go for full perfection. Go for, like, where can you actually support and actually create momentum? Then as more money comes in, you can go through another cycle.
So you get a new idea, you share that idea.
Yep. And the thing that moves this cycle along is our mental capital and relationship capital. Too many millionaires try to do too much on their own, and they think they're the smartest in the room. But if you actually leverage relationship capital, tap into that, you now get other people's ability to contribute to this as well.
Yeah.
So a cycle of creation, the first cycle might be like this, then the second cycle, and then it gets a lot more exponential. The way we keep moving it along is our mental capital and our relationship capital.
So on relationship capital, you talked about how what billionaires do a great job of is using other people's time, other people's money, and other people's, what was the A? Ability. That inherently, at least from the perspective, looks like it requires money, to where you have money to hire a person for, a highly competent person for $150,000 or $200,000 a year or something like that. How can someone do that if they don't have the capital? How can they build a team that way without the capital?
Give up equity.
Oh, okay.
Raise funds. In today's world, you can crowdsource.
Okay.
You can go to Indiegogo, Kickstarter. And so, this is really cool, because in Money Unmasked, I talk about this concept: win, then play. So in the old days, you'd say, all right, I've got this idea. We need money. Let's borrow. Now we have to pay that borrowing back.
Yeah.
Right?
You're stuck with it.
In today's, it's like, here's our idea. If you put it up on Indiegogo, it's now a concept because it's been outlined. People can say, great, I'll give you money, but instead of you paying them back, you give them the product. And so they actually fund what you're building, and they're part of the process.
Yeah.
So that's pretty brilliant. I mean, back in the day, I share this in Money on Mass too, so France decides, all right, we're going to give the Statue of Liberty to the United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it'd be a terrible drawing here, but, we have Lady Liberty holding up the torch,
Yeah.
And at first they just were sending it across the ocean. So and then it gets here and it's just floating in the Hudson River.
Uh-huh.
Like, okay, what do? We got to build some type of platform for it, right? To put it on. So they could have issued bonds. They could have just gone out in the newspapers. We're going to issue bonds. Or the government could issue bonds. But what they did was they just said, would you like to make a donation? And if you donate, we'll put your name on a brick. Or we'll give you first access to get in.
Mm.
And so they were able to fund this whole thing off donations, but there was a benefit to the donation. That was original crowdsourcing.
Yeah.
Right? So I think perfectionism is a problem, because if you tried to build the perfect product and you fund it, the market may have changed.
Yeah. And you'll have put a lot of money into it.
So it's cool if the market says, great, we like the idea, we'll fund it. We'll give you feedback along the way, and we'll get it and start using it early on as the beta users. And then we'll become advocates that start sharing it with other people. And then you can ride that momentum.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe some millionaires are trying to do too much on their own. They're not getting enough feedback. They take it too personal. They're not collaborating with enough of people. They have too many things going on to the point where they don't have bandwidth for the things that might take off, because they say yes to far too many things and they're distractions. And they look at billionaires, and billionaires might have a lot going on, but they didn't start that way.
Yeah.
Elegant, simple, focused, impactful. Might have been difficult to get there. They might have had to wait longer for it to actually pay off, those kind of things. And look, there's those crazy billionaires out there that just risk it all, live on a couch, and then they make it one day. That does happen. But I think that there's, for every one person we put on the cover of a magazine saying, look at this risk taker, and they made it, and they gambled it all, and it worked out, we're not hearing about the 999 that risked too much and didn't do it strategically.
Yeah.